And for me, this pretending and living the way that is not aligned with my authentic true self and my values led me to all sorts of physical and mental health conditions. Since I was a young girl, I suffered from eczema and depression, and in my adulthood it led me to burnout and having to take sick leave from work a couple of times. And it took me years and years to really feel confident to be okay just to be me. And my yoga practice, and I'm not just talking about physical practice here, my yoga practice really helped me rediscover my true self, to feel confident, to express my authentic true self, to speak up, to share my views and opinions, and to be me. Welcome to another episode of the Journey Podcast. The Journey Podcast is all about sharing the journeys of purpose-driven leaders from all walks of life who are following their passion and fulfilling the purpose in their own unique way. And I'm your host, Risa Kawamoto, and my pronouns are she and her. So today's episode is going to be a solo episode, and it's going to be a part 1 of the series where I'm going to be sharing my 40 lessons I learned in my life to celebrate turning 40 this year. And in this episode, I will be sharing the first 10 lessons from my personal life. And part 2 will be focused on my career, and part 3 will be lessons I learned in my yoga journey, and the part 4 will be lessons I learned from my business. So without further ado, here are my first 10 lessons. So the first lesson I wanted to share is freedom comes with responsibility. Some listeners will know this, but I was born and grew up in Japan until the age of 9, when my parents decided to send me to boarding school in the UK called Summerhill School. Summerhill School is an alternative school where lessons are non-compulsory and both adults and children have equal status. I'm going to read a paragraph from the school's website, which hopefully will help you understand a little bit more about the school's philosophy. So it says, Summerhill's aim is to allow children to grow naturally, to experience personal freedom, to play and develop at their own pace, and to go in their own direction whilst taking responsibility for their own actions and the community around them. So because of my experience in Summerhill School, I really learned from a young age to make my own decisions and take responsibility for my own actions, which really served me well in my adult life actually. So I left Summerhill School at 16 and I moved to London on my own instead of going back to Japan and living with my parents again, like some of my friends did, because I wanted to be independent. Well, partly because I wanted to have freedom as well, because my parents were really strict. But I have to say that it was really, really hard at the beginning. I had to earn my own money to pay bills, rent and bills, food, travel, and all the college expenses as well. So yeah, basically I had to earn money to pay everything. And I didn't have anyone that I could rely on, and I didn't have any close friends that I could speak to in London. But this was my decision, and I had to take responsibility for my own actions. And this really kept me going, even though it was really, really hard, and I was also really lonely as well at the beginning of my life in London. So that's lesson number 1, freedom comes with responsibility. Okay, so next lesson is my stubbornness is a gift. If you didn't know, I am very, very stubborn, especially when it comes to fairness, and that hasn't changed from when I was little. I used to get so angry when I wasn't treated equally with my brother, and I would make a point and I really, really make my voice heard in every way possible with my parents, usually with little success, I have to admit. But I was kind of reflecting on this the other day, and I wonder why I am so passionate about equity, diversity and inclusion work. So my stubbornness caused quite a bit of challenges in my life, especially in the corporate environment. Corporate environment can be very, very challenging for me sometimes, with so many written and unwritten rules, and oftentimes corporate can set in their own way and they offer little room for innovation. And I really had to learn how to pick a fight that is worth fighting for, as I often didn't want to back down when I know to be right, and I really stand my ground. But I have to say that my stubbornness got me to where I am today in my life, my career and my business. My stubbornness helped me pursue my passion to create a positive change in the organization I work currently, doing my EDO work. And my stubbornness helped me pursue my yoga, Ayurveda and coaching business, or I should say continue pursuing my yoga, Ayurveda and coaching business, and trying new things when things didn't work out, and navigating through challenges and rejections. So if it wasn't for my stubbornness, I would have stopped my business long time ago, because running your own business is really tough. So thanks to my stubbornness, I am still here now, figuring out how I can build and grow my business, doing my podcast, and I'm gonna continue disrupting society norms and disrupting yoga and wellness industries, and continue with my passion to create a world healthier, happier, fairer place for everyone. So that's lesson number 2, my stubbornness is a gift. So next lesson, answers come from within. I used to seek out answers from the external world, especially when I was going through some challenges in my life, whether that was my career, relationship, or my business. I wanted other people to tell me what's the right thing to do, because that's easy, asking people, what's the right thing to do. And it's funny saying this because I'm a certified coach as well. But when I been coached, I worked with multiple coaches in the past, and I'm currently working with my coach, Reshma, who I interviewed in a previous episode. And I often want to say to my coach, please just tell me what I need to do. And I really have to stop myself from saying this to my coach, because that's no one can tell me what's the right thing for me to do, and I know deep down that all the answers I'm seeking are already within me. And I was just talking about my stubbornness as well, and I feel like coaching really complements my stubbornness, because sometimes I can be stuck in my ways and I am stubborn, and sometimes I'm not willing to consider other options or other people's views. So I really like coaching in that sense, being asked powerful, thought-provoking questions and that can really help me dig deeper into the reason behind my thinking or my actions. And I am also really mindful when people come to me with advice as well. I try not to tell them what to do or tell them this is the only way to do things. And instead, I ask the same question back to them to get them to think deeper and help them decide what's right for them. Or if people really want to get my advice, I would usually start a sentence with, if I were you, I would do XYZ. So I'm not exactly telling them what to do, but I'm telling them that, if I were in your situation, I would do this. But make decision, for yourself, because you know what's right thing to do deep down. So yeah, that's how I give advice to people nowadays. So that's lesson number 3, answers come from within. Okay, so lesson number 4, creating positive ripple effects in everything I do. When I was a young girl, my mum always used to tell me to open my eyes and see what's happening in the world. I am an 80s baby born in Japan when the economy in Japan was booming, and my dad, who is self-employed and runs his own pharmacy, he still does, so his business was doing really, really well back in the 80s. And although my dad was always really careful with money, I always had everything I needed in my early childhood. So my mum constantly reminded me of my privilege on a regular basis, which I am really, really grateful that my mum said that to me when I was growing up. And she would read an article from the newspaper about poverty and wars happening in the world at the time. She would also record documentaries on TV, and so I could watch and learn about the world. So my dream became, when I was young, was to become a photojournalist. I really wanted to travel the world and report what's really happening in the world through photographs and writing. And my thought back then was, if more people in wealthy countries knew about all the terrible things happening in the world, we can collectively do something about it. I just thought that maybe no one knows about all these terrible things happening because my friends are talking about this. So that was my thinking back then. But I decided to not pursue my photojournalist dream in the end because of my language barriers, which I will talk more about in lessons from my career in the next episode of this series. But my dream kind of shifted to working in a charity sector or not-for-profit. I really wanted to create a positive impact in the world, and that's always been my true nature on reflection. But instead, unfortunately, I worked, not unfortunately, because I learned so much. But yeah, I worked in the private sectors during my 20s, and I was smoking and drinking a lot, neglecting my health. I was always tired and not knowing how, or feeling really lost and not knowing how a young Japanese girl like me living in London without any proper formal education or degrees, how can I create the change with little education, no degrees, and being a foreigner, an immigrant in this country. But when I started learning yoga in more depth, and when I did my first yoga teacher training back in 2014, I came across the Vedic philosophy teaching of karma, which is that our actions are the result of a ripple effect of the previous actions. So the Vedic philosophy teaches us that everything we do sets in motion and have certain consequences and results that can either be beneficial or harmful, or positive or negative, or even a mix of both. So since then, since learning about this Vedic philosophy teaching of karma, I started taking care of myself more. And it started with quitting smoking. And quitting smoking really made me want to eat healthier food. When I was smoking, I wasn't eating properly, and I didn't really have to eat much somehow. But when I quit smoking, I really wanted to eat more food and healthier food, and that led me to wanting to practice more physical yoga practice and doing more exercises and being in nature more as well. And then that led me to appreciate and care more about the environment and the planet. And because I was eating healthier and doing more yoga practice and exercises, being in nature, I slept better and I felt calmer and I felt less reactive to certain situations as a result. And I felt more compassionate with others around me and of course with myself as well. So hopefully you'll see the you kind of get the idea of the positive ripple effect one action can create. And so I now ask the question to myself, ask this question to myself all the time: what positive ripple effect do I want to create with my action I'm taking right now? And this is why I am really passionate about sharing yoga and Ayurveda, and I'm not just talking about physical yoga practice or Ayurvedic diet or lifestyle as a practical tools. I'm also passionate about sharing yogic and Ayurvedic philosophy, Vedic philosophy, because I know that by sharing yoga and Ayurveda to my community, I am creating a positive ripple effect. If people are kinder to themselves, if they feel good about themselves, they will have the capacity to be kinder to others and the planet. And that's the sort of positive ripple effect that I like to create with my work. And this question also served me well as a manager and a leader at workplace, working with my team members in my day job. I always try to lead by example, although obviously I'm not perfect, so I do make mistakes sometimes. But my hope is that by doing my inner work, my personal and professional development and my self-care, I am able to be a better manager to them, and as a result, hopefully they would go on to become an amazing manager themselves in future, if that's what they desire. So that was lesson number 4, creating positive ripple effects in everything I do. Okay, so next lesson is learning to be okay just to be me. So having gone through a unique education and as a Japanese woman living and working in the UK and working in the organization predominantly white and working in a yoga and wellness industry where it's dominated by white, slim, able-bodied females, I always struggled with the feeling of being an outsider and not being able to fit in because I'm not a stereotypical yoga teacher or coach. And I always had this feeling of that I don't feel British at all, and I also don't feel Japanese. I always say I'm Japanese. I left Japan as a child, and my English is not perfect and my Japanese is not perfect. I feel like an outsider when I'm in Japan, and I feel like an outsider when I'm in the UK. But this feeling of an outsider or I'm not normal was already there before I came to the UK, actually. I never liked when teachers in a kindergarten or school in Japan were telling me things I didn't want to do. And on reflection, I feel like I didn't want to do things that I didn't believe in, or I didn't feel aligned with my authentic true self and my values. But throughout my teens and in my 20s, I often mimicked the way I spoke and the way I behaved, depending on where I was and the people I was with. I was getting what I thought was a good job in private sectors. I was presenting myself as a professional woman with a designer clothes and handbag. That was pretty much my 20s, and in my 30s, when I started teaching yoga, I felt like I needed to look, speak and behave in a certain way to present myself as a yoga teacher to make people like me and be popular yoga teacher that you see on social media. And for me, this pretending and living the way that is not aligned with my authentic true self and my values led me to all sorts of physical and mental health conditions. Since I was a young girl, I suffered from eczema and depression, and in my adulthood it led me to burnout and having to take sick leave from work a couple of times, a few times in my working life. And it took me years and years to really feel confident to be okay just to be me. And my yoga practice, and I'm not just talking about physical practice here, my yoga practice really helped me rediscover my true self, to feel confident, to express my authentic true self, to speak up, to share my views and opinions, and to be me. So thanks to my yoga practice. So lesson number 5 is learning to be okay just to be me. Okay, so next lesson is learning to accept my family. Okay, so this is a difficult one to share as it's still an ongoing thing for me. So as I shared earlier, I came to the UK when I was 9 and I spent 7 years in a boarding school, so I haven't really lived with my parents since 9. I was really angry at my parents for many years for sending me away, for not being there for me when I needed them the most. I was an angry child and teenager. I mentioned earlier I suffered from depression. I started smoking and drinking around 13, even though I knew it was harmful to my body, but I did it to feel a sense of emptiness that I was experiencing. And I had to go back to Japan actually 3 times a year during holidays. And I have to admit, I really hated it. I argued with my parents on a regular basis when I was in Japan. And I remember arguing with my mum a few days before I was going to go back to UK when I was 16 after leaving my boarding school. I was heading back to UK to go to college and starting a whole new chapter in my life. I was really, really scared and nervous about the whole thing. And then a few days before I was flying back to UK, I had a massive argument with my mum, and she said to me, and I still remember this, and I bet my mum wouldn't remember this at all, but she said to me to never come back home ever again. And I really took this to heart, and I didn't speak to my parents for at least a couple of years after that. And what always makes me sad as well is that they never tell me to come back to Japan to see them ever in my life. And so I always felt really, really sad, thinking why they can't be like my friends or my boyfriend's parents, where they speak and see each other on a regular basis. And it was really activating for me when I used to go to my ex-boyfriend's parents, for example, and seeing them having a great family time together. I did try and attempt multiple times to organize a family holiday, but no success. But over 20 years later now, I know that my parents did what they thought was the right thing to do at the time when they decided to send me to the UK, specifically to Summerhill School, so that I could have a different education to what I would get in Japan. And I know that they are maintaining a relationship with me and my brother and looking after us in their own way. And I had to accept that I can't change them and that I need to accept that this is how it's going to be for us as a family. And yeah, but it took me years and years to forgive and accept this truth. So that is lesson number 6, learning to accept my family. Okay, so lesson number 7 is putting myself first. So putting myself first as in taking care of my physical and mental health and well-being. So as you probably know by now with all my lessons, I grew up abusing my body with a lot of smoking and drinking from a young age. And I also put up with stress at work and my boss in my 20s or 30s even though I was feeling burnt out, and just continue working and neglecting my health. And I think pandemic really helped me realize I need to put myself first. And I had no children and caring responsibilities during the pandemic. So working from home full time meant I had more time to do yoga practice and take care of myself, because I didn't have to spend 2 hours a day commuting to work back home. And I also had more freedom to go for a daily walk and do some stretches in between work, because no one was watching me. But I was doing work, I promise. But when I was in the office, I always was so careful not to be away from my desk for too long. And I also drink less now, because the stress I used to get from commuting is not there anymore. And last year I had an opportunity to manage a small team, and this experience also taught me to take care of myself before taking care of others. Many people often tell me how calm I am, and I am always so happy to hear this, knowing my anger issue. And this is credit to my yoga and self-care practice, which really help me regulate my nervous system. And I recently found out that research shows that managers and leaders at work can transmit stress to their teams and people they work with. And I think this really proves that prioritizing self-care is really important and really benefit yourself and other people around you. So yeah, putting myself first, that is my core principle in my life now. Okay, so next lesson is acknowledging my privileges. So I mentioned earlier about when I was growing up that my mom would constantly remind me of my privilege. And as we all do this, but it's really easy to take things for granted and focus on the struggles and challenges that we are facing. And for me, that's being a foreigner and immigrant in this country, and being a woman of color, and my lack of education. But I recently took this conscious marketing training course delivered by Tristan Katz, and in their training we discussed a wheel of power and privilege and our social location. Social location, if you're not familiar with it, and it's something I learned very recently as well, is a social group membership and identities, and it's a tool people can use to reflect on the groups that people belong to and identify their proximity to power based on identities they embody. And it helps us show our points of privilege and oppression. So I may be Japanese and I don't have a British citizenship, and English is not my first language, and I'm not university educated either. I'm a cisgender and heterosexual woman with a smaller body, which is a privilege. So what I realized from this exercise and discussion with the group in my training is that my privileged identities, so cisgender, being a cisgender and heterosexual woman, and having a smaller body, the ones that I think about and share with others least often. And this was a powerful realization for me, and I vowed to share and acknowledge my privileges more often going forward. So that was lesson number 8, acknowledging my privileges. Okay, we are almost there, 2 more. So lesson number 9 is healing happens from sharing my struggles. So a lot of the healing that happened for me was from talking about it and sharing my struggles with others. And it's something about expressing my struggles in words that's so healing for me, whether it's in writing or talking about it. And I think it's something about acknowledging and accepting my struggles as well. And I also regularly receive lovely feedback from people when I share my struggles and challenges, that they really appreciate me being open and transparent about it. I don't think I have much to say about this lesson actually, rather than I really appreciate all of your feedback, and I will continue to be open and transparent with my journey. Okay, so it's not last, it's last in this episode, lesson number 10. My scoliosis is a blessing. So some of you may know that I developed scoliosis as a young girl, and I have been living with my scoliosis and chronic pain since. And although scoliosis caused a lot of pain and made me feel insecure about my body at times, I learned to accept it as a blessing nowadays. And because my scoliosis tends to cause aches and pain, especially when I'm tired and stressed out, it really reminds me to slow down and rest. If I didn't have aches and pain in my body, if I wasn't tuned into my body, which I really learned to listen to my own body and tune into my body because of my scoliosis, I would probably just continue on working and not resting and just go. That's hugely me. That's my true nature. So, and also scoliosis led me to start my yoga journey as my physical yoga practice to begin with, and that physical yoga practice really helped relieve tension in my body as well and bring balance back to my body. And yoga philosophy teaches me self-acceptance and self-compassion. So I'm really grateful for my scoliosis now, as it made me appreciate my body and the power of healing as well. Okay, so that was my 10 lessons from my personal life. I hope it was interesting to hear my lessons, and hopefully you learned something from it as well. If you enjoyed this episode, I would really appreciate if you could rate and leave a review so we can reach as many people as possible. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll see you in the next episode.